full 7 days. So, how many of you are doing better than you thought? Like, maybe not necessarily like a specific number, but just maybe, let's say, mentally, which is the most important thing. Yeah, awesome. I've been hearing that a lot, and of course, really tonight, the goal is you're going to learn some strategies that's going to help you beyond the 8 weeks. Because this next 7 weeks is all fine and dandy, right? But if like things go back to what they were before this, like, what's the point? You might as well stop now. You know what I mean? Or like, well, obviously not. But like that's the goal, is that you're developing habits right now and skills and ideas and just a hopefully a new way of looking at things through this challenge, so that you can propel you through going on later in your life. So what I'll do is that these kind of pair off, so as I kind of write some ideas down, I'll stick them somewhere over here, so that way you'll be able to look at them later. The goal is that you really listen tonight, taking notes, that if you want to, I'll be talking about some key subjects and be writing some kind of prompts on here that'll hopefully help you click and remember these little things. It's being filmed right now too, so I'll make sure I post that. So if there's something you couldn't remember what I was saying, you'll be able to go back and watch it, okay? So, the big thing about tonight, we'll go over those papers. You can write on the back if you want to, or if you have a note bag, that's fine as far as if you want to do notes. It's really going to be about cementing the reason why you're doing this challenge, and again, helping you develop the skills now. So, I'm going to spend some more time kind of talking about the big why, because it really drives everything. I mean, willpower is good for a week, right? Willpower is even good for 30 days. Willpower can even last sometimes 60 days, like the length of the challenge. But if this still is not big enough and greater than the habits and the things you liked to do before the challenge, willpower is only going to get you so far, all right? And I can promise you, hopefully it doesn't happen, but some of you will find that in the next 2-3 weeks that when it was easy to say no to certain things before, it's going to be not quite as easy as it was this first week. So if you're prepared for that and honest with yourself, you can know, like, oh, you know what, my willpower is waning, so now it's time for me to reset or refocus, and again, focus on the reason why I'm doing this and why I'm doing anything that when it comes to related to my health. So there's this story about two brick masons, okay? If you don't know what a brick mason is, they lay bricks, right? It's hard work, and they were both working in the same place, and they were interviewed by this philosopher. The philosopher came up and they asked him, what are you doing? And he's like, well, one of the brick masons said, oh my God, I'm laying these bricks, my back hurts like crazy, it's so hot out in the sun, my hands are bloody, this is really, really, really hard work. And he said, okay, so he went to the next brick mason, doing the same thing, whereas the first guy kind of had like this pained look on his face. The other brick mason had this smile, this happy face. And the guy's like, same job, it's different perspective. So what's the difference? So he asked him, so what are you doing? And he's like, well, I'm laying bricks. It's really hard work. My back really hurts. It's so hot out. It's hard stuff. But to me, this is not just a job. I am planning on, and I'm helping build the most beautiful chapel that this city has ever seen. I won't see it built before the day that I die, but I know that every single brick that I lay is helping me create that. And so again, it comes down to the perspective that you can take in anything. If you could look at the juice, right? The juice, this gross juice versus I am doing this to nourish my body for a reason and help me to control my cravings and reset my digestive system. So again, let me just ask you, how many people were kind of able to figure out what their big why was and wrote it down and kind of did that? Okay, so about 2/3 of the room or so. And again, put that someplace where you're going to see it frequently if you have not already, and put it in places where you might be tempted, right, too. Like maybe if you're in your car or and on your fridge, maybe, whatever it is, right, so you don't get tempted. Another story that I think really illustrates that well is the story of the Wright brothers. And everybody knows the story of the Wright brothers, right, as far as flight. But what a lot of people don't know is there was this other guy named Samuel Langley, who at the exact same time not too far away was trying to also, have the first manned flight machine. And the thing about him was that he had all kinds of crazy money. He actually had the War Department just giving him as much money as he needed. He had all the the aeronautics engineers of the time, the brightest minds kind of helping him do that. All this publicity and everything. The Wright brothers, they were on a mission. Like, we just want to get flight happening. They funded it themselves. They would literally go to their site with bringing several different parts because they knew they were going to crash. Like, they literally just knew they were going to fail. So they brought all kinds of parts with them, just knowing that was going to happen. But they were, of course, the first people. In fact, when they flew for the first time, there was nobody there. Like, there was no press or anything. So they had to call them, hey, we got flight. And then they showed up for the second run of that. As soon as Samuel Langley found out that the Wright brothers, flew, he quit. He just stopped. He's like, well, I guess it's not worth it anymore. He just gave up. And all that money, all that kind of stuff went to waste. So clearly he was not doing it for trying to, develop this amazing technology, an amazing way of travel, and that would become, He was doing it for fame and fortune. It wasn't a good enough reason, right? But the thing is that what he could have done is he could have called them up and, hey, what the heck did you guys do that I missed with all my dollars, X amount, right? And then take that and then make it even better, right? Even, we have all the money to build more parts stuff, but he gave up and quit. So again, it comes down to the why as far as, again, the reasons for you doing it. So I love that story. So a couple things we're going to talk about tonight is the power of your mind, all right? And the thing about your mind that you have to understand is that you have, I remember putting up zeros here, 100 trillion neurons in your brain that are all working right now together. Some of you, they aren't working so good, some of you are working better, right? But to put this in perspective, okay, if you were to stack dollar bills, 100 trillion dollar bills, okay, just from one end to the next, you would be able to go to the sun and back from here 10 times. That's how much 100 trillion is. And you have all these little neurons going on inside of your brain right now that are connecting, all right, they're firing together, right? The kind of the word of this is that the things that fire together, neurons that fire together, wire together. So we use an example like golf, which I'm not very good at, but I want to be better at. There are certain neurons, mainly motor, right? Some visual, some mental, neurons that are required to be developed and be connected and be strengthened to develop a more natural golf swing. Like if you look at a professional, if we looked at the way their brains light up when they swing a golf club, it would be like crazy versus mine. Or an amateur would be very little, although it's the same connections, but it just wouldn't be as strong, right? But the part of the reason being is that every single time they do that, and the more that they do those practicing and draw those connections together, those neurons get stronger, they get more strongly developed, and they get better. So you get to a certain point where a guy like, Tiger Woods before his injury could swing a golf club, really not be thinking about much and be able to drive it, 350 yards. Where an amateur's guy, okay, I gotta line my feet up, right? You gotta get it's all in the hips. You're thinking, okay, I gotta swing, bend, right, and all that stuff to make it happen because those neurons are not as well established. So how does this relate to your health? Part of where the struggle comes from being healthy is you have to realize is that your neurons, up until this point, have probably been hardwired for cheap, quick, convenient, right? Whatever's right in front of me, whatever gives me immediate satisfaction. Your brain is literally hardwired and loves that. So when you're breaking against that, and that's where a lot of you are running into maybe some issues, is that you're literally essentially destroying or downsizing, if you will, a better word, downsizing the neurons that are quick, convenient, easy, cheap, whatever, and rebuilding quality, right, value, for my health, spending time with my family, making these things, and really establishing new neurons with that, okay? But again, the more you do that, and that's why, for me, it's the point now where I don't, for the most part, don't have to think about trying to do something healthy, I actually have to think about doing something unhealthy, where a lot of you, again, it's your tendency is just going to be to always want to kind of drift that way, at least in the beginning. So again, it's okay to know that your brain is that way or was that way, and so you can rewire it, okay, again, to a more conducive pattern for you to be living a long and healthy life, okay? Now, there's two parts of your brain I want to talk about. One's called the conscious and the other is called the subconscious. So conscious, put simply, is going to be like thinking, clear thought, like I'm going to drive to Whole Foods. I know I need to go south on 401, take 540, right? Pull off, drop, blah, 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 right? Okay. Subconscious would be all the things that you don't really think about but still happen. So it would be things like you're breathing right now, you're not having to think about breathing. Your heart is beating right, you don't have to think about your heart breathing, it's just happening. Another really cool thing that happens with the subconscious is something called the reticular activating system. It's God's first Google, right? You know what the reticular activating system, it's a network inside of your brain, and what it does is it works like a Google search engine for you. A good example of what the reticular activating system is, how many of you, at one point, like, you're like, I don't know, maybe not say a dream car, but you're like, I want to buy a red Ford, right? Something specific like that. So you get that in your mind, or your friend had a red Ford, and you're like, oh, that's a really nice car. And then what happens as you start driving down the road now? What do you see? All the time, right? And you're like, well, they were there before. It's not like there was also more red Fords just because you wanted one, but you begin to search that. So when you put things into your subconscious, into your reticular activating system, things like, and I know you've all been there, right? You're scrolling through things like Facebook, and now all of a sudden, other posts that people are posting or other articles that people are catching your eye as related to health. And then you'll come in and you'll say, oh, did you hear about this XYZ article? And like those articles were there the whole time, but now that you've begun to look at health in a different way and be around it, now it's catching out to you, right? Or you begin to see other things that maybe are not so good, or you're like, man, I always used to do that, but this, when I look at the ingredients, has this, this, and that, but you've been eating that, and that label was there the whole time, and now you just realize that you see it in a different way. So the way you do this, again, is continually putting information into your brain, because it sinks down to your subconscious first, actually, all right? It actually goes into your subconscious first before it goes into your conscious brain. The opposite. It goes into your conscious brain first, so you're evaluating, you're assessing, you're filtering things. So the more that things come in through your conscious, it gets shifted into your subconscious again, where now your behaviors are happening without you even thinking about it, okay? Is there any questions about that? So you want to have, again, we're developing a healthy subconscious mind when it comes to your health, particular activities. It's actually very, very, very cool. So you'll see that also. You'll be all seeing red Fords, as I talked about it, as you're driving down the road, right? So what we repeatedly think about and where we focus our attention is what we neurologically become. I'm going to say that again. What we repeatedly think about and where we focus our attention is what we neurologically become. I'm fat. Right? You look in the mirror, you say that over and over. You may not be saying it out loud, but you know you're telling yourself that in your head. Or, I'm out of shape. Do you see? Yeah, that right there. Gross, right? You're saying all those things, or I'm poor. Or, I don't know, I never have enough money. I never meet cool people, good people. I can never find the right person as a spouse or whatever. You know, you say those things in your mind all the time. Every time you do that, you are literally hardwiring your brain to believe that. So now they've done studies on this. They've literally done studies on this. Where they have people talk in mirrors and tell themselves that they were fat or healthy. I think they said skinny during the thing, and they had the same diet, same exercise regimen. The people that told themselves they were skinny lost more weight. Because your body literally biologically responded to the words that they said. Mind-blowing, right? So again, what you're feeding yourself in your mind, which is why I'm a big fan of things like affirmations, you know, or they really, 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 really freaking work. This is real life, right? They work. So you're telling yourself in the mirror, and not like I'm going to be healthy, I'm going to be skinny, or whatever you're telling yourself. You say I am, because when you say I am wealthy, I am rich, I am healthy, I am pain-free, I am off my medications. Your brain is literally going to be responding, and there's literally chemical reactions that happen all throughout every single cell of your body that respond to that. So you change, I've heard it talked about before, like the tapes that are playing in your head. you have the ability to swap out the dumb tape, right? The destructive and negative tape, and put in a new tape and start playing that through your mind every single day. But it takes work. You know, you don't just like change your thought process by saying, oh, you flip the switch, no, my thoughts are better. You have to physically do it. The mirror is great. It's a little weird at first if you've never done it. I'm serious, because like you're like yelling at yourself. I think the more energy you put behind it, the better. A lot of times when I'm driving here to work, if I feel a little flat, like energy-wise, I will literally be shouting in the car to get my energy up, because like I know like the first person that I adjust, like this morning at 7:30, doesn't deserve like 4 out of 10 Dr. Barnes, so they need 12 out of 10. So I think it was you, right? You were number 1, yeah. So you deserve 12 out of 10, right? Not 4 out of 10, even though it felt like 4 out of 10 when I got in the car, you know? So I'll shout things like, you know, I'm super energetic, I'm a leader, I'm changing the lives in this town. I yell those things, and I gotta walk in here like I'm ready to freaking conquer things, right? Even if I don't feel like it. So it does work. So we'll do a little, I want you to just kind of experience this. So everybody's gonna do this little finger exercise with me. And I'm gonna show you how you can, within seconds, within a minute for sure, develop new neurons. So the pattern, what you're gonna do is, and before you do it, just watch me. So you're going to touch your finger and your thumb together, your finger and your pinky together, your finger and your ring together, your finger and your middle together, okay? So dent, 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 dent. So go ahead and start doing that, okay? Kind of feels weird, right? So pointer, pinky, ring, middle, pointer, pinky, ring, middle. Start trying to go faster, okay? A little bit harder, you start going faster, right? You get a little stumbly, okay? All right, now I want you all to stop. I want you to close your eyes. Without moving anything, I want you to mentally visualize yourself with the same hand that you were doing, mimicking those motions, okay? So pointer, pinky, ring, middle. I want you to do it at least 10 times in your head. I want you to very clearly see that. Go ahead and open up your eyes. I want you to do it physically again. Try to go as fast as you can. Easier? A little bit than before you shut your eyes. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
So even by thinking it, you're firing the same. If you hooked up, $1 million equipment to your brain, those same things that when you were doing it physically were lighting up in your brain, the exact same patterns. So again, when you're telling yourself these things and when you're mentally rehearsing these things, your body physically responds to it mechanically, hormonally, and everything. So what this is called Hebbian learning. Hebbian is just the name of the guy, right? And the most famous kind of study that shows this is there was a group of people that did piano exercises, okay? So there's 4 groups, and for 3 hours a day for 1 month, they practiced a kind of a set pattern of piano playing. So the first group physically practiced that set kind of musical notation, whatever that they created, all right? So one group physically practiced it. They had the sheet from them, they physically practiced 3 hours a day, 1 month. The second group just did random, so they just played the piano, but there was no, so they weren't developing like practicing the same melody. There was another group that just visually watched, okay? The group that physically played and practiced, all right? And then the other group was they just mentally practiced. They had the sheet music and they weren't allowed to physically move their hands at all on a keyboard. They weren't allowed to touch a piano. Sorry. And so what they found was that there was the exact same brain growth in those areas as the group that mentally did it, as the group that physically did it. Exact same, right? So again, when you understand, and I don't want to be like all. Some people think like when you talk about like the power of the mind or the power of your brain, like it gets like this weird like airy-fairy or like like new age type thinking. We're talking about the brain that God gave you, right? He hardwired it that way so you can either use it or again you lose it. Another group, and we talk about physical strength, they were allowed to physically move their finger like this and then just mentally physically move. The group that physically moved it, 30% muscle growth in their finger. The group that just mentally did it had a 22% muscle growth without moving their fingers at all. So their muscles literally got stronger and more developed just by mentally exercising their muscles. So it doesn't mean you recommend just like, what are you doing? My workout. Maybe you could do something more like that than wasting time scrolling on Facebook for an hour every night, which we'll talk about later. So, and that kind of goes along with neuroplasticity. And a lot of times I hear that things like, "Oh, I'm too old to change," like the whole saying that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But your brain really never loses its neuroplasticity, meaning the ability for it to change. There's been no proof of saying that it loses its ability to change. Usually, it's just people just get more lazy with it. But it's really important. So again, repeated thoughts wire, and they go together. And eventually, what happens is then it becomes less effort to do that. So meaning that it's something to look forward to is that the more you are healthy, the easier it becomes to just habitually and behavior-wise be healthy, right? So listen, some of you have been doing this for only a few months, maybe even only a few years. But it's like, how many stinking years before that were you not? You see how many decades essentially of neurons you're having to undo to form these new patterns. That's why it's hard, and that's why it's easy to be good at something for a while and then you fall off track, right? Or you get sucked back into old patterns and habits because your brain is so hardwired. I know I'm beating that up a lot, but it's just because it's true, okay? But your brain is so stinking powerful and it wants you to be healthy. So when we talk about strategies then to create change, one of my most favorite books that I've ever read, and it's actually a new book. It's kind of more a business book, but the same principle applies. Grant Cardone is the author, and it's called 10 Times. And basically what he says in there, in order to be massively successful at something, in order to grow at something that you're doing right now, in order to become, let's say, world class in anything, you need to really ultimately put 10 times the effort as what any normal human being would in order to get there. So what's an example of that? Say you're not able to lose weight and you've been trying and all these things, and you say, well, I've tried everything, it's just not happening. Well, have you tried working out twice a day? Right? There's no rule that says you can't do that, right? Have you tried doing specific testing on your body to see why that's not happening? Have you tried working out twice as hard as you did level of effort before? I mean, I'll tell you what, it's pretty hard to die from exercising, but if you've never puked after exercise, you've really never pushed the full limits of your body, right? I mean, I'm serious. I know it sounds kind of gross and weird, but if you never puked after the exercise, you had something left in the tank, which means there was that reservoir that you did tap into, and that might be what your body needs to do in order to make the change, right? So if you feel like you've just been at the same level all the time, I don't know. When I was in track, I remember I used to run the 4x400. It's just one lap around. It's not even that far. I would literally vomit after every single time I ran that race, to the point where the coach would just have a bucket ready for me when I got done. And I remember my senior year, we went to state. The state track meet, our relay team was, and we ran it, and I did puke. I'm like, oh my gosh, the last race of the year, I did vomit. So we placed. We didn't get first, but we placed, so we were going to be on the podium. And we were under the tent, and it's it's in June, so even in Minnesota, it gets fairly warm at that point, definitely humid. And we were sitting there, and they were calling 5th place, 4th place, and all of a sudden I'm sitting there. This is 30 minutes later, and I'm I feel this rumbling in my stomach. And I'm oh my gosh, what the heck? There's 2,000 people in the audience, and I feel, and then they call Alexandria. And so my team gets up, and I'm like, hold on a second, guys, I barfed right there. And then I like a champion, I got up, got my medal, and probably all woozy, and then we got it. So I didn't end up barfing like that, but it's 10 times, right? 10 times. Or another way of looking at it is that, again, if you want to create change in your life, you think you may be going 10 out of 10 hard at it, but if you try going 12 out of 10 at it. This for a lot of you, this is where it's showing up right here, just that principle right there, because I guarantee you've been missing that if you feel frustrated or stuck on a certain thing, okay? One of the examples I know I use is well, you could do 50 burpees a day for 50 days on top of what you already do, and I guarantee you'd see change, right? Just guarantee it. Or you could run a mile every single day on top of what you do, and I guarantee you'd see change. Whatever it is, again, 10 times for us, we're all going to look different, right? For me, it's running 10 times a day, running 5, 10 miles a day, right? Which would be outside of my comfort zone. The point is, it is outside of your comfort zone, right? I showed that little thing at the seminar a couple weeks ago. Where your comfort zone is in here, but then over here is where the magic happens. So a lot of you have been wondering when do I get to experience the magic, right? The magic happens when you are fully outside of your comfort zone. Okay? Which a lot of you got out of that, not eating anything for 3 days, which is super awesome. Okay? So some ways to kind of blast through this. Comfortability, right? Complacency is another way that we said that. Simply is do one uncomfortable thing a day. And that may not be like you have to go streak naked, at a football game, because that would be uncomfortable, right? But it could be something simple like, I'm going to talk to that person in church I've never talked to before. Or I'm going to take a different way home. Right? Like you drive from work to home the same way every single time. There may be a slower way, but how do you know there's not the most beautiful garden or whatever if you took a different way home? And it might actually change your life by taking a different way home, right? So the uncomfortable thing doesn't need to be like, you have this butterflies about it, but you do something that you wouldn't normally do, and what happens is this comfort zone then begins to expand. And it begins to erode, The most successful people in life have the largest comfort zones, right? Or small, however you want to look at it, but they've blasted through their comfort zone more times than we have. It's that simple, You can say they got lucky. Well, you name any successful person, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, whatever. Any person you look at, money is just always a good example. Or what about professional athletes? They worked way harder than anybody. They were the ones where their friends were out, playing video games on a Friday night, and LeBron James was at the basketball court, when everybody was shutting the lights off and saying, "Why don't you come home? Why don't you stop?" But he's like, "Well, no, because I want to be the best, ever, best in the world." So you blast through that comfort zone by doing one thing. And then every now and then it's good to, shock your system. One example I like, and I do this a lot, is changing your shower temperature. It's like you do it, whatever hot, it's not going to kill you to do it super cold once in a while, right? I'm telling you, some of you will do a cold shower. You can do it for like a minute, and you'll be the most invigorated that morning than you've ever felt in your entire life. I'm not joking. Or something like a comfort zone might be turning your TV off at nighttime for once. That might be really uncomfortable. So the other thing about this too is the importance of new. New experiences create new neuronal or neuron growth. Okay? New neuronal. New experiences do that. That's why skydiving is always like a fun one, right? I've never done it, but skydiving, which I'm afraid of heights. That's probably getting out of my comfort zone more than anything. But again, something new, right? Talking to a new person. That's how your brain grows. You get more blood flow to your brain. It makes it easier to develop new behaviors and cement those behaviors if you're continually doing new things on top. Some of you are doing, and I get this whole boot camp is new for you. Exercise is new in a way. Not eating for 3 days is new, and it's great. And that's part of it. Intermittent fasting is definitely a new thing as well. But at a certain point, right, intermittent fasting is going to become not new anymore, right? And then it's going to be, when it's not new anymore, it's going to be easy to miss a day. Oh, I won't do it today. And then the next thing you go a whole week, right? Or not eating sugar is a new thing, but then not eating sugar is not new anymore. And so then it becomes that eating sugar is new again, right? So you're constantly kind of fighting against that, but it does help. All right. I want everybody to get this thing out. It's called the Wheel of Life. Okay, so how this works is, in the middle is 0, okay? In the middle is 0. You'll see each section of the pie has a fun and recreation, right? So it's 0 in the middle, 10 on the outside. So what you're going to do is you are going to honestly assess yourself, okay, as far as where you are at in each one of these areas. So let's say I'm a 8 in career, 5 in money, 9 in health, 3 in friends and family, right? So you're gonna do all of those. And you're gonna put a little dot in the middle.
Do I have, or how good am I at?
Yes. Yep. Yes. Like, how much control do you feel? How good are you with it, right? And again, the more brutally honest you are with yourself at this point, the better. I mean, most of us are probably not going to be 10 in anything, but you might be. I'm not going to say you're not.
So 10's the best.
10 is the best. 10 means you are like world class, could write a book. People would come pay you to teach you about that, right? 0 would be you have no business telling anybody about anything in that area, right? But what's funny is that the zeros, 1s, and 2s are usually the ones that try to make advice in those areas, which is why you gotta be careful who you listen to.
What's the physical environment?
Exercise. Yeah. You have like your physical health in that sense. And also you could look at it too as like kinesthetic, like how in tune are you with that? That's almost a different thing. But
Which one is that?
physical environment. Personal growth would be like how actively are you seeking out, are you reading books that are growing, are you having conversations that you feel like you're a better person afterwards, learning essentially. Career, I mean if you're retired, you can kind of look at it more so as what you're, like let's say you have a lot of family duties, like look at like what you're, if you still have a job, even if you're retired, you have doing this and that, helping other people, right? It never ends. Health, 10 would be exactly where that would be like relationship with your significant other.
So how happy you are, you're married?
How happy, how fulfilled. They would say the same thing, friends and family wouldn't necessarily only be frequency of how often you spend time with friends and family, but also the depth of your connections when you're doing that. Yeah, friends and family be not your spouse or your kids would count in that though too. It's not your spouse, but separate. Okay, is everybody done? If you're not done, just raise your hand so I know.
It's your boyfriend. Who's your boyfriend?
Okay, now what I want you to do, when you're done, connect the dots like this. Okay, so just from one section to the next, you're just going to make a straight line in between those, okay? And I kind of, if your pen's light, really emphasize, just so you can, I want you to be able to really see it clearly. So if your wheel was a tire, how well would you roll?
Terribly.
You make it like not even a mile down the road, right? So what's the point of this, right? And I mean, again, this is me just encouraging life for you all too. Is that okay? Obviously, whatever's, you look at my wheel, whatever's in this section right here, that would be an area that I would want to focus and grow in, right? To make more balance happen. So my health's pretty good, so it doesn't mean you take the foot off the gas for that, right? But it's like, man, you can reassess and be like, hey, when's the last time I called my best friend and just hung out, had a quality conversation, right? Or we went and did something meaningful.
Recreational.
Exactly, yeah. So,
Where do I start?
Look at it, right? And I welcome, this is learning, right? So, did anybody, just looking at your wheel, any aha moments? Just like, I'm not going to put an idea in your head of what you might say, but anybody just like when you're looking at your wheel, anything jump out to you about that?
Yeah, I need to get active.
But you see, like, we don't ever self-assess, right? We don't measure ourselves really. Like your bank account is maybe something you look at a lot because that's easy and measurable. But like, when was the last time you measured yourself and how you were doing a personal growth, right? Or specifically, like, yeah, how connected are my spouse and I right now? Like, truly, like, honestly, because if you're saying it's an 8, but it's really a 3, you're in trouble. You know what I mean, right? That's the reality. Or it's like if you're saying you're an 8 in finances, but you're really a 4, again, you're in trouble because you're probably bleeding money, right, in those areas. So the more honesty, I say that because for time's sake, you might want to go home and look at these areas again and see if, like, as you kind of think about it more, if there's a more accurate number that you have, because you can't fix something that you don't realize is broken or breaking, right? So, anybody have any aha moments looking at their wheel? I know it's a big crowd, so you're making shy. There's okay. Something you say might help somebody else.
My wheel's really small.
Okay.
It's round, but it's really small.
Okay. That's a good observation, right? It's a good,
To get to one place.
so it's a lot easier to go, like with that, instead of trying to take something from a 5 to a 9, it'd be a lot easier to try, how can I make all these from a 5 to a 6, right? And build it that way. So, like this one for sure, like I need to figure out how to get that from a 4 to like a 6 or a 7 as quickly as possible. Probably not going to get it to a 10. If it's a 4, there's no way you're going to 10 overnight, right? It's going to take a long time. Right?
I'll be here for you.
You are all my friends, so I actually, this is not I just wanted to make this real quick to give me, you know what, here's the thing, it changes too, right? It changes, and that's part of the balance. I just Googled this up, it's called the Wheel of Life. You can Google your own if you want to print it out, the Wheel of Life. It's good, I'd say to do it once a month, honestly, because there's times when like my career is a 10, and I'm like, yeah, this is all, like life is going great. And I'm like, honey, how's things going? And I'm like, where are we at? She's like a 3, and I'm like, damn, right? Like it's actually not really good, right? Because that wheel is gonna fall. It's gonna self-destruct. Okay, it may seem good in some areas because those 8s and 9s and 10s can kind of mask how good your life may be, because you're probably 8, 9, or 10 in the areas that are either really easy for you or just kind of like come natural. Versus the things that might take more work and focus are probably going to be lower because it's just human nature to not face the things that we want to face, right? So do this frequently because it really, 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 really does help to self-assess. And again, like, a lot of times when and then also what I do too with this is I set like a minimum threshold on certain areas. Meaning like, so my career, let's say, whatever, it's right here, my money, whatever, here I set like a minimum threshold, because sometimes, like when you're facing crisis, right, it's like I may need to, in order to build this one out right here, I may need to let this career drop down a little bit and make some sacrifices in order to make myself more well-rounded, right? So you have to, be aware of that. Listen, we're not all going to have a wheel that looks like that ever. I mean, like, you're never going to have it look that way ever, okay? If you do, I will hire you as my personal coach. Spend a lot of money, all right? But it's certain things like, I know that if my, I guess I don't know what my actual number is. I'm just getting better at it. But like if spouse, significant other kind of, let's say, drops below like a 7 or an 8, it's time to call the marriage coach, Get on a call with that so we can get that up to a 9 right away. A 3 or a 2 would not require a marriage coach, right? That would require a marriage counselor or a lawyer, I have different like stop checks in my life where it's like, oh crap, we missed a little bit, but it's okay right now because I'm building up these areas which are very important to me as well, right? So again, it's this constant evolution and changing. And it's natural for it to change seasons of life. You know, you'd be more focused on certain things, other things. But you have to get more sensitive to this, otherwise that's when your life falls apart, right? When your wheel gets out of balance. There's no secret for it, okay? Now flip over that page, okay? We're gonna do another drill, and some of you have done this drill before, but I do this again at least once a quarter, and it's super, super helpful. What I want you to do is you're going to, going down your paper like this, you're gonna write these categories after me, all right? So, sleeping, working, eating, TV, computer, phone, family, recreation, hobbies, driving, church, let's say prayer, faith, you kind of clump that all into one. Some of these we'll clump together too. And then like reading. So these are just kind of the basic categories that when I think about a typical week for me, that's gonna probably be 95 to 99% of the things that I do, right? On an average week, okay? Right. So here's what I want everybody to do. This is gonna take a while and that's okay. Let's try to keep the noise down though, because otherwise it'll be hard for people to think and concentrate. What I want you to do is figure out how many hours per week, on average, and again, just take an average week, and I know you have to think, and it's okay, and you may not be perfect, but average week, you do of each one of these things. So an easy way to do it, well, the easiest way to do it is to think like, okay, Mondays, this is usually what my Monday looks like, so what, you know, blah, 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 so I spend this, okay, I have a 15-minute commute to work 5 days a week, 15 minutes there, 15 minutes back, so that's 30 minutes a day, right? You can kind of do it from there, plus we do the groceries, right? So you want to be as accurate and specific as you possibly can, hours. And you can break it down if it's, you know, 15 minutes would be 0.25 hours, 30 minutes would be half an hour, right? 45 minutes would be 0.75 hours. Now, if there's, excuse me, another subject not on here, like that you do a lot of, make sure you write that down and you account for that, okay?
This
So,
is per week.
on an average week, yep, per week.
Wait, does eating involve cooking?
What's that? Yeah, eating, you can do prepping, cooking, okay?
Does recreation include exercise?
Yep, if you wanted to. I don't care how you actually designate it, just make sure you know exactly what that is, okay? And if you do, let's say you watch TV, like while you're cooking food, for the week. For the week. If you always are watching TV while you prep food, you just need to pick one category or the other. That it goes, and you don't want to double count. Like, if you listen to whatever, sports radio and you drive, pick either driving or sports radio, okay?
Your computer time, is that for work related too, or just at home?
It's up to you. It's probably best to keep everything work related work, and then this might probably be more personal time. And it may seem tedious right now, but it's going to be very, very, very powerful when you have this actually mapped out.
So can your phone time, does that count as if you're scrolling on Facebook?
Yeah, however you want to,
Or putting a message on the AB food camp?
however you want to personally classify it. It doesn't matter, yeah. I'm saying again, if you do dual things, just make sure you just pick it in one category or the other and not both. This will be good with you guys before you'll see how much different it is, right? Yeah. You know, pick the big categories first, which is easy. It's like you average 7 hours sleep a night, just multiply that by 7, right? If it's an average. You work 8 hours a day, you know, like strictly right? You can multiply that. Again, don't think too hard. Remember, it's just an average, you know, just an average, general as you can be, but it might be a week. I know you work, whatever, 70 hours a week, but pick an average week. Like, and again, so, like, that was a good question. Family time, watching TV together, pick a lane. Which one is it, right? Just, you need to differentiate that. Like, we watch a 2-hour movie every, you know, Friday night, let's say that's your thing as a family, like pick it's either movie time, like TV time, or family time. I'm not judging you what you're counting, you just need to make sure it's accounted for properly, not double counted. And if this is super hard, just, you know, one of the things that means is you have no control over your life right now. Which is good to realize, right? If it's hard, it means you have no control over your life. It means life is controlling you. It's only where it's not really yes, that's in your control. So again, if you go on Facebook on the phone, either phone or Facebook, right? Pick whatever one you want. Yep. So, like, hobbies would be like, you like to paint, you like to play board games, I don't know, right? Recreation might be, you go to the park, you go spend a couple hours a week going to museums, I don't know. However you want to differentiate in your mind, doesn't matter. I just put that in case people kind of really differentiate that.
I work more than I sleep.
It's totally fine if you're not done. Just like raise your hand if you're not done yet. Okay. So let's go another 3 to 5 minutes.
I'm the same way.
So if you're done, what you can go ahead and do is add up your total amount of hours that you have written down there at the bottom. Yep, add them all up. And then don't change, like once you're done, you're done. Don't change the numbers even after you add them all up. Because whatever came in your mind first is probably most.
Daddy, let's make a pretty guy.
Anybody calculator? See his common core rotation there. Wherever you want to put that. Right, sure. Family. Oh, you know what? Ooh, I forgot a good one, sorry. Personal care. Yeah, hygiene. Quick, allocate some hours to hygiene, right? It takes you an hour every morning to get ready. There's your answer, right? I know, right? Yep, evening.
Personal hygiene.
All right, everybody good? Okay, how many hours in a week? 168. Yes. How many of you are, your total is under 168 hours? Okay?
Say that.
How many are under, your total number is under 168 hours? Okay, hands down. How many of you had more than 168 hours? Interesting. So if you are under, it means your transition times suck. Now I'll talk about what that means, okay? If you are over, number one, it means you're busier than you think you are. Your multitasking is not working, okay? And your focus also stinks. If your total number is under, like so you're 140, 150, whatever it is, that means your transition times are not good, and I'm gonna explain that in a second. What that means. If you're over, so if you're 170, 180, 200, whatever it is, means you're busier than you think you are. Your multitasking is not effective in your life. It's not, even if you think it is, it's not being effective, and your focus also is not good. Like focus on what you're doing in the moment, present time consciousness, things like that. So transition times means this. You go from waking to personal hygiene, right? To food, to work, right? To home, to food, to family, right? To bed, whatever it is, right? It's very, very generally, okay? What this means is that this would be considered your transition time. So the amount of time it takes you to move from one thing you're doing to the next. So if you're low on your hours, you are wasting so much darn time in here you don't even realize it. That's why you're not, and and also you weren't honest with what you're actually feeling. We all have the same number of time in the day, right? Minutes in a day, hours in a day, minutes, hours in a week. So it's like, how could someone account for 30 more hours than you, even though they have the same life, right? It should be the same. It's because, well, based on where they are, right? How many of you are super close to this? Okay. A couple of you? Yep. So, transition time. So it means like, when you go from weight to your personal hygiene, I don't know, maybe you get up, you turn on the TV for a few minutes, let's say, or you check your phone, check your emails, do all those things, and all that stuff is adding up way more than you think it is, because it's delaying from you from going from one thing to what you think you're doing next, right? So you'll find, I mean, it's good to evaluate, and you'll be aware of this tomorrow now, or all of a sudden, you'll be like, oh, geez, there's 5 minutes there, 10 minutes there, an hour there, and then you're like, geez, if you just, like that, you'd have like an extra 4 or 5 hours per day to do something else. Some of you. Some of you at least would have an hour, so you say, well, you know, all these things, right? Well, no, the hour is there, it's just that you're wasting it on something that is not important to you. Because if it was important to you, right, you would have written it down on here. Yes?
I'm not sure where something like that would fit, but like in my case, like I get a gazillion interruptions just from my
Yep.
kids.
Yep.
Just, mommy, I need this, or
Yep.
mommy, I need that, or help me with this, or get me this. You know what I'm trying to
Yes.
say? So
Yep.
I don't know where I would incorporate that, but I think a lot of my transitioning is, mommy, prove the milk for me, you know,
Right.
that kind of
Sure.
thing.
Yeah. And that's all normal.
So how would I
That's
manage
normal.
that?
Yeah, so how would you
It
manage
work,
that?
but
Get a nanny.
Yes.
But I'm
So-
saying in order to better my time, you
Yes.
know what I mean?
So part of it is you have to deal with what's in front of you, right? But if that's happening like crazy all day long, then I bet you're this is next to nothing.
Well, my schooling is what ends up suffering.
Well, sure, but still though, right? Like again, I guarantee you there's something else on here that you're not doing enough of to create balance though.
Correct.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Even, I know we all have so many other things we could be doing, but it's still, we can carve out that time if we allocate it appropriately, right? And I know there's certain things that'll come up, and it's not always gonna be that black and white, but typically, again, when there's something like that, there's one of these areas that is being, you know, is sucking you dry, or is bone dry when it should be more plentiful because you're just, because then you get tired, you know, let's say from all that being pulled in a million different directions, so then you don't take care of yourself, but then it just creates a destructive cycle, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that's if you're under. Now if you're over, yeah, you think you're way too busy. You're busier than you actually are because you're adding literally hours of time in through here that don't exist. Because you think you're busy. You think you're busy, right? No, I really like that. Like, there's no other way that could be, you know, right? So, also, were you over or under then? Just curious.
I was around 135,
So you were way under then, yeah. So
but I think
you need to look a lot,
I need to.
and you maybe missed a few things here, and
Yeah.
that's fine. But
But I mean,
really,
interruptions would probably got me to 168 at least.
but I would look at your transition time. So how fast you can shift from mom to schoolwork, from schoolwork to wife, you know, right? And I bet you're bleeding a lot of time in there. I understand that. Yeah. Multitasking and getting focused. So people that are like this rarely are as good at present time consciousness, like meaning you're not in the moment. You're thinking about the next 5 things you need to do versus like where you're at right now. Okay?
Here's my thing, my big joke is I have early onset dementia. Because I don't know about anybody else, but I spend half of my day looking for stuff that I just put down as a minus.
Yeah.
Like, and that's where my like, Chris is like, where are your keys? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, but part of that is, part of that is what you're going on in your life right now, you know, with that, but
But it's
a lot
always
of it
been like
is
that.
this.
I had my first year woman at 12, and it just,
A lot of it's just focus though too. Yeah. You can only assess. Okay, how many of you had more than 60 hours of sleep? Okay, kids should. Any adults? How many of you had under 40?
What?
Bad.
Wait, what?
Bad.
How much should you have?
Under 40.
Stop putting that.
You wouldn't be around me in the 40s.
So if your sleep number is really low, I can promise you that this is probably high, this is probably high, this is probably high. Honestly, it's probably not being caught up with things that are like really, really good for you. Maybe I'm gonna overgeneralize, right? I mean, hey, if you're doing an extra 17 hours of, I don't know, reading about, yeah, well, certain things. Okay, how many of you got more than 30 hours of TV? Okay. Come on, be honest. It's only 4 hours a day. Think about it, a lot of you turn the TV on at 6 o'clock and you don't shut off until when you go to bed.
I'm the only one that watches TV in this whole room.
Liars.
Oh, well.
I can guarantee you. And see, this is where you gotta be really honest with yourself. It's like, if I were to follow you around for a day, for a week, you know, what would these numbers actually show, right? You can tell yourself the good story and not get better. How many of you more than 20 hours of computer a week?
Well, that's good, that I'm
More than
Yeah, so that would be school for you, like school specific, right? Okay. Because if you're fiddling around on websites, reading sports, you know, whatever, watching the stock market go up or down, I guess right now maybe, right? How many of you spend more than 10 hours on the phone? Yeah, that's a big one.
I'd rather be on my TV.
So the way that breaks, that's about an hour and a half a day. It's like, who are you talking to? You know what I mean?
I'm not
A lot of it's
talking.
mom, right?
Oh, is it, wait, stop.
But again, and if that's really important to you, I'm not saying that it shouldn't be important, but if you're not aware of how much you're like, oh crap, I'm doing way too much on the phone, right? Unless you actually count it out. How many of your family number was, when you actually wrote it out, was lower than you really needed to be? Yeah.
No, but see, I talk to my family on the phone. I watch TV with them. I do hobbies with them. I drive with them.
Right. So that's why you need to pick
If I
pick
had
which
to
one
pick
it
a
is.
number,
Yeah.
my number for family is low.
Yeah.
My TV was high, cause I
Well,
mean, that was the fourth thing on the list.
here's the other thing that, and I'm not challenging you specifically because everybody else is gonna be thinking the same thing. If you're linking this with that, this with that, I would challenge on the overall quality of that time, right? There was actually a study done where they looked at CEOs of companies and just the general whatever, like their employees. And when they did a survey looking at how many hours they report how many hours they spend with their kids and with their family, you know, each of those groups, and then they asked the kids the same thing, the family same thing. The CEOs on average were like less than an hour, but the kids on average put 2 to 3 hours. And the work, like, and I'm very generalizing and saying working class, right? But like people, they would say 5 to 6 hours, but their kids actually said about half of that. So they actually both perceived the same amount of time, even though one was way less. And the point of the study was is that, like that CEO, and again I'm generalizing, executive, whatever, knew they only had an hour, let's say, so it was 100% present right there. They weren't doing anything else versus, oh, I'm with my kids, we're in the living room, we're watching TV, I'm watching sports, they're playing right there, they're playing that, they're on, one's on one tablet, I'm on my tablet, you know, so meaning like the quality of perceived time was everything, right? Like I could ask, you know, you how much you think that I spend adjustment-wise with you, and I bet you would say more than it actually is. Hopefully, I hope so anyways, I really hope so. Because hopefully you think that I'm 100% focused and present with you when I'm doing your adjustment, even when there's all kinds of craziness going on, right?
A lot of my recreation time is with my family, eating with my family. So I was, you know, you just
Yeah, I
said
went
in a category, and so I
Yeah, and again,
went down the list.
I'm speaking very generally, right? So it's just something to assess. I mean, usually a family and a recreational thing, and that when unless your definition of recreation is like being on each on their own iPad, right? Like that's probably going to be a higher quality expenditure, you know, of time, right? Or doing hobbies together, or yeah, I mean, you're going on a road trip and you're talking, you know, but you may have to do that every single week, right? But again, it's also looking at the quality of that time too, not just the quantity, okay? Because sometimes I only have like 30 minutes, not every day, but like sometimes I have like 30 minutes with Nora, but it's like my phone is off, I don't have anything else going on because like she deserves that full 30 minutes of my 100,000,000% attention and nothing else, right? Versus there's some Saturdays I was like, oh, I spent the whole day with her, but it's like I wasn't actually present with her 100% even for 1 minute of that, right? Because I was doing something else. Okay?
And they know the difference.
They know the difference. That's what I'm saying. Like their perception, and you can actually supersede their value, right, with that.
In my household, my kids almost demand, because we're so busy. Like on either Friday or Saturday, movie night, so we're just like all present together watching the same movie, not
Yep.
doing anything else,
Yep.
and game night.
Yep, exactly.
When we're all playing the same game, we're all kind of into it.
Yeah, so again,
That works.
I'm not making any judgments when I say these things out there, but it's just something for you in your own life to assess and see.
You know, I'll
how
say
you're
one
doing.
more thing and then I'll shut up. But I went to Disneyland with my kids, okay, that's considered family time and all that. But I was amazed, and it was actually my son that pointed it out to me. Parents in line with their children for a ride. Each parent was on their cell
Yeah.
phone, and the kids were just standing there.
Yeah, you see it.
I mean, not even.
But eventually they'll be old
talking to
enough and they'll be
their
on their own phones, right? So
And,
it's just
yeah,
like,
and
it's
then,
mimicking
you
that
know,
behavior.
here they were in Disneyland, and supposedly went as a family,
Right.
was in line to do something as a family, and they weren't in the moment.
Another big waster, personal hygiene.
No, actually,
What do you mean, wait? Mistake, we did.
No. I'm saying, honestly, like, look at this number. Because come on, we've all been there, and I'm not saying you have to do this. We've all been there when we've gotten ready in 4 minutes versus 45. And nobody would have probably known the difference if they looked at you, right? To some degree, right? So I'm saying the point is here, no, I mean, you guys think I'm crazy, but whatever, keep wasting time, and that doesn't bother me, right? I'm telling you, I bet you have time in there, especially females, obviously, right? I bet you have time in there that you could find. Or, what if you got something like audible.com, audiobooks or something like that, and you were learning while you were doing stuff that you have to do.
We're in your car while you're driving to work.
Exactly.
They say
Podcasts, you know.
Yep.
Yep.
I was on a podcast.
So I'm saying again, you can turn some of these things that
Yeah.
have to happen into like productive, right? You know, you could be like your prepping time. You can do it with your spouse, with your family, with your kids, get them involved, or if you're by yourself, you could do, you know, those audiobooks or something along those lines. Or you could be catching up with a person, a meaningful conversation that you haven't had in a long time, right? So again, the point is we a lot of times we just mindlessly do these things. And I say mindlessly because again, most of you like really couldn't, it took a long time for you to kind of figure out where you allocate all of your time during a week. And again, that's like I was saying, that means you're not in control of your life right now. Life is in control of you. So what you do from here, taking this, like what's the point, what does this information do to help you? You do, this is the last thing we're going to do, and then we're done, right? Hopefully this has been helpful so far. Yes? Yes. 3 people? This is, I mean, honestly, these drills that I'm going through, the reason why I'm doing them, they've been probably the single most productive things I've ever done as far as taking me to where I am in my life and where I'm going to go. You do what's called a war plan. Schedule. I like work plan better than schedule because it sounds more like you're going for it. You know, schedule sounds lame. So what you do, and we're not going to do this here tonight. I'll honestly do this. I would do it tonight. Remember we talked about loading, law of diminishing intent. You do something right away, and you're more likely to do that. So you take your week. And again, you're doing an average week. Start your day whenever you start your day. You end your day whenever you end your day. And by the way, if your starting and ending times are also very erratic, I understand weekends may be a little bit different, but if your starting and ending times are very erratic, that's another sign that your life's out of control. You go to bed at 11 some nights, 2 in the morning the other nights, you wake up at 6, 8, 9, 5. It means your life's out of control, so your body's out of control too, because it needs that rhythm. So what you're going to do then, as realistic as possible, and keep in mind, you're putting in things that may not seem productive, and that's okay. You're being realistic. Like I, oftentimes on Sunday, from like 1 to 6, you know, we'll just have a big chunk of free time right there where it's like, I don't necessarily know what I'm gonna do during that time, but it's not gonna be work, it's not gonna be that, and that, you know, and I can fill it in then whoever I want to at that point, right? But I'm always, that time is blocked off just to be family. If I've ever been out of town, and I need to do 6 hours of family there, right? Or maybe, I am behind on some reading and planning, prepping, and I'm like, okay, well, I can carve out an additional little bit here if I need to, because then I'll work, you know, usually from kind of 8 to whatever, right? So you're going to put your schedule together. So you wake up, personal hygiene time, prayer, rituals, whatever it is. Then you have your food prep, your commute, your work, right? Whatever it is, your commute, right? Your food prep, your eating, your TV, or whatever it is, your growth, your learning, whatever the case may be, and you kind of plot that out as specifically as we possibly can. Again, using kind of the categories that you have right there. Then you'll actually, again, if you can kind of do that, if you're average, we can actually write it out like that. You might actually feel how off you were in your numbers too. You think, oh, you know what? I leave my house at, or I wake up at 6 and I don't get in my car until like 9. What the heck do I do for 3 hours, right? You can actually then kind of break that down a little bit more specifically, okay? So, your planet. I'm telling you, all successful people in life have one of these things they follow every single day. Or some version of that. Some version. So planners are good. I use my Mac, but if you're like a cool thing to write in for this, there's one called a Passion Planner. They're like $50, but they are awesome. My wife just she was never a scheduler or a planner or anything like that. She bought one of these, and it's like, now she's like talking about starting a business and like doing all these things. I'm like, this is awesome, but it's because you can actually look at her life. You'll have, and then we can go another level, and then what I do too is every day I set either 3 to 5 goals that I'll determine the night before. So it's like, these are 3 to 5 things I want to accomplish tomorrow. And it's like, okay, well, I want to do this, I want to do that. I got to allocate it into my schedule then if it's actually going to happen, right? So then it becomes less like, I want my life to be better, I want to be healthier, versus here's the plan of how I'm actually going to do it, right? And when you write it out, then of course it's more likely to happen. Is it going to be perfect? No. What you make on Sunday night was when I usually do my work plan. Looks a whole lot different come Thursday, right? Most times, not always, but a lot of it is. But it's this constant reassessment, readjustment, and doing that. And you stay ahead of the game versus, again, life being in control of you, which doesn't end well. Let's just face it, doesn't end well in any area if your life's in control of you. You're just out of balance. The wheel gets off then, right? And again, you can look at, you can take the wheel, assess this, crap, I'm a 3 on friends and family. Well, you know what? Instead of spending 4 hours Saturday morning watching college football or whatever, why don't I call up, blah, blah, you know, you guys see what I'm saying? You can actually fix those things then, again, when you have your schedule and your life in place. And a lot of times people, I always had this myth that doing this was like really restricting, right? Like being this regimented. I can't tell you how much freedom this creates though, being this boundaries and this kind of stuff. It actually creates more freedom than you could possibly ever imagine because you're in control of your life. So you can do whatever you want. Correct. Yeah. And again, then you can transition fast. So then you know, okay, well, in 20 minutes I'm doing this, so you get there really fast versus like, oh, what am I going to do next with my life? And then you just do 2 hours gone, you know, on Facebook. You all know you've all been there, yeah. I'm not saying I'm perfect. Please don't. In fact, my Facebook would be way out of balance right now because of answering all your guys' questions. Which is okay, it's only for 60 days, so.
For us, it's okay.
Yeah, it's all right. Last question.
I just wanted to make a comment that I kind of learned this, I don't know, idea or concept years ago. My husband and I took a vacation. We didn't really do a whole lot of research as to what we were going to do each day we were there. The entire vacation, we almost spent it in a hotel trying to look through different brochures and stuff of what to do in the area because we didn't prepare ourselves. We wasted our whole day trying to plan an itinerary. And so ever since then, I kind of do something like this, and I have like even a vacation planned out and have everything lined out. Okay, this is what we're gonna do this day and this day and this day. And it was a blessing because it opened my eyes to realize how much more stuff we actually can
Right.
do and how we enjoyed it.
And so when you apply that just to your everyday life, the exact same
Yep,
thing
yep,
happens.
yep. It's really actually
No
good.
different. Okay, that's it. Thanks for coming. Yeah, hopefully this was helpful. If you have questions for follow-up,